Milliken.
No, right? And Kevin McGarvey, where are you?
Kevin's over here.
Okay, so I'll let you go ahead with the presentation.
And we're privileged to have Bill Group, president of LA&L, here today.
Oh.
He's going to stand up back there. So if we can't answer your questions, you can corner him later. You ready to go?
No, I'm not.
Oh.
Yeah, thank you for the
You got all the lights turned off. Vince, myself, Kevin said he wasn't going to say anything, but he will. He just pretends to be shy. Vince and I have been involved with the railroad almost from the beginning. I started in the spring of '65, and you started in...
Well, we started in the volunteer crew in the fall of 1964.
And all these years I've been volunteering, still am. These guys finally, when we finally got some money, we were able to pay some people a little bit. But for many, many years, we all struggled and tried to do this. So anyway, we're going to work together on this. I got about 140 slides to show you, 130 I guess. Thanks to George, Schuster, Kevin, Vince, myself, Gene Blaby. A lot of people had slides that they allowed us to use. We picked them out and we'll show you those. We're not going to cover every little detail. We've given you a list here. And Dorothea, Bradley, on your list of people that you have. And we tried to put that together with everybody we could remember. We've already discovered there's some names we forgot. There's a star after each one of the people that were on the original board of directors. So you can, you'll see some of those, thanks to George. We have those on the slide. So we started the railroad in '64 to help maintain freight service here in Livonia. There used to be some shippers here, right? There was the grain mill. Who else?
Oscar Smith Grain Mill, there was the Qualitat Beverages right across from the depot. Right where Bunkers is at today, there were Andy Gilmore had a grain mill in Lakeville, of course Smith Lumber. They had a lumber yard. Progressive Foundries was still getting a car of sand in once in a while, along with maybe a couple of cars of iron ingots for the foundry process. And at that time, they were still bringing seed potatoes into South Lima.
Yeah, about 50 cars a year, if we were lucky. That's all we did. Sometimes, Gene mentioned that sometimes a month would go by and there wouldn't be a single train to Livonia in the wintertime, which maybe that was good for us.
And during the winter, quite frequently, the railroad would just go dormant after the excursion season. And then if a car of freight did have to be moved, usually the Wingate brothers, Harmon Merle Wingate, would come down, start up the diesel engine, go to Avon, pick up the car, bring the car up for the customer, put the engine away, and then when the car was empty, then they'd repeat the process and take the car back. But that was basically it. It was a very seasonal operation.
And we ran the railroad pretty efficiently because when we started running passengers, we ran the freight and the passengers together. We didn't make two trains. I'll turn the light power on. Pictures that, I think I took that one. We noticed, we were looking through the pictures, we noticed that there was one car and an awful lot of pictures sitting right there. Maybe it was one of the railroad employee cars. But this is the beginning. In 1964, when they started raising money, selling shares of stock at $10 a piece.
Are those
Raised enough money.
Are those George's boys?
I don't know who they are.
Yes, they are.
They're Schusters.
Oh, okay.
It's right in front of the old newspaper office.
Yeah. Now, I don't know, this was an Erie train here. They come up special for part of the fundraising, I guess.
Yeah, if that was coming up, that hopper car would have been for Gilmore's down in Lakeville. That was probably a car of anthracite heating coal. People were still heating with coal at that time in some places.
And here's some of the people in gathering. I assume it was in the fall of '64. There's snow on the ground.
It's Rosemary.
Maybe some of those people I don't know, but there's another picture in a moment that shows us.
Is that the one today? They're still using that train?
No.
No, that's an Erie train.
Oh, it is?
Before this was LA&L, just in the beginning when they're organizing it. And once they had a little excursion with those
Yeah,
two
there's Ray
cabooses or
Fisher.
something.
Bill Sweeney,
Ralph
Ralph Davis.
Way in the back is Dr. Collins, just see his face in there.
Right there.
Yeah,
Right.
see, these people all know these.
Who's that guy in the end that's kind of bending forward?
They call you people old timers, huh? And you remember all of them? I remember somebody asked Frank West once, they said, well, you're a newcomer. He says, well, I lived here all my life. What do you mean? Some more faces.
That's Howard Beach on the right,
Oh,
Ray Fisher, Kent, Gordon, and Deep Davis in the back. He was a supervisor then.
That's George, isn't it?
No, that's, you run the hardware store up there.
Oh.
Brittany.
That's right, Ring, that's right. That's right. Yeah, exactly. Boy, he looks lovely.
Bus Myers.
Oh, sorry with his pipe.
My God, look at that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who's the engineer after you?
I don't know
Who's on the back? That's Sarge, isn't it?
Sorry, it looks like.
That's Sarge right back there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Not sure how far they must have gone to Avon and back, I guess. I don't know. Maybe it was one way.
Well, they used to run those trains in the 40s. Because we bought our farm in 40 and the train was going up the track then to
Mm.
Whalen.
Yeah.
Bad.
Yeah.
That's Bill
Bill
Brown.
Rowland, yeah.
As far as I know, the yellow paint was donated by Wilmette Oil over in Hemlock. How many people remember that?
See, I can just show the pictures and you guys can fill in the details. I'm not sure who that one is.
I don't know who's
It's a little precarious there.
I
Don't think that's me.
Yeah.
Looks a little like me, but I don't think it is. I don't remember doing that.
Yeah.
I don't know, it almost looks like Ronnie Vandermeer. but
Oh,
I-
maybe it is.
That's what I think.
Yeah. That's probably who it is. Well, there's 10. Our first locomotive was 11. That side rod, you can fill in the details, Vince, because I never saw it.
Yeah, the first engine we had was number 97, and it was similar to number 10, except it only had 2 traction motors instead of 4 traction motors, and it was woefully underpowered for the grade from Avon up to Lakeville. It made the trip up to Livonia. I think they moved 1 or 2 cars of freight with it, but it became very apparent that they needed something with more power. So they sold 97 to the Rochester Gas and Electric Company, which needed a switcher for their utility station, and then they bought that locomotive from the Vermont Railway.
And for those of you that don't quite understand how these diesels work, because you're going to see an awful lot of them, it's basically, it's got a diesel engine in there that's running a generator that sends electricity through the controls that the engineer has down to electric motors that drive the wheels. Those are called traction motors. Oh, hi, Sandy.
Wasn't cold.
No coal, no coal, oil.
Wow.
That expensive diesel fuel. And that's the engine that I learned on, running, helping run some school excursions, and my first solo trip was one day coming into town when, right over there, they waved me down because I think it's the day that they had the fire on the right of way.
Right, the right-of-way fires from the...
Yeah, they had in the steam engine, they had holes in the where ashes fell out, and then they would fall out of that, and then so they had fires all the way from here to Avon. All the fire departments from here to Avon were out. They wouldn't let them run it the second run. So they said to me, well, here, you take the next train and you run it while we fix it. And that was my first solo run, so I made it back. This is the ticket office. I'm not sure who that is in there, but
That's Kelly and Surrey. He used to run the store down here on Commercial Street called the Barn of the Sheik. Anybody remembers that? That's Kelly and Surrey, and I think we probably needed a ticket agent that day, and we got him to sell tickets. He also had a gift shop in the waiting room. So it's kind of convenient, I've got to jump back and forth and kind of, you know, run two stores, so to speak, at the same
I
time.
can smell that room.
You can smell it? It had a certain smell to it.
Incense or whatever you want.
Still there?
From the inside. We have some tickets next door and brochures and things that came from this place. There was a, where you could look out this window, you see it stuck out in the front, so the agent could look down and see the train coming from that way or coming from the other way, and then make the semaphore work. The early days, you know, each station had to telegraph ahead to the next station to see if the tracks were clear, and then they'd send the train. And so that's why these guys were so important. You couldn't just call up on the radio and dispatch the train. There weren't any. Or telephone.
Where was that? You didn't say where that was.
Oh, I didn't say that's at the
No.
mill in Avon.
No, the
I mean here, right here, right here, Andy.
You
Yeah.
gotta sit still, you're jumping around, you're making.
Oh, am I making you nervous?
Yes.
It's that call.
Sorry about that.
No,
I thought you'd tell me where it was.
I don't know.
Well, old number 10 was our power for quite a while and pretty dependable. Just some shots we picked up between all of our slides. And then we got our first steam engine, number 17. That's, I don't know, what's the age of that one? When was that
It was
built?
built by Baldwin in 1927.
We had that for you.
28.
That's the one I learned how to fire on. I was conductor for a while, and I thought it'd be fun to learn to run that,
Did
and
that
fire it.
actually
And
go?
so that went fine. You'll see it in a minute. It'll be coming. And so I said I'd like to learn to fire it, and I went up and spoke to Blaine Pink and Donahoe, and they said, well, you stand here like this, and you take the shovel, and you put it in the coal, and you throw it in there. And they handed me the shovel. That was my training. Now, this railroad is built from here to Avon, downhill, 1% grade. So every 100 feet, you go down a foot. So you can coast from here to Avon, pretty much. Coming back, you got to shovel like crazy. So my first experience out of town, I made it almost a stone hill and ran out of steam. Downhill. And so that was the big joke to them. They said, now here's what you should have done. They showed me how to build a fire up.
I got a question. When you're shoveling coal in those things, I heard back as a kid, we had coal stove down cellar, and you throw a couple of shovelfuls on it last half the day.
Yeah. Takes
You
time.
guys, they always show them shoveling that coal on, it doesn't seem possible it could be burning that fast and getting that hot that fast.
Well,
How did they?
the reason is it's like a forge because the smoke comes through the stack, and on the top of the stack is where these cylinders exhaust. So every time the exhaust comes out, it goes whoosh, and it pulls that air right through the firebox, just like a forge. And that's burning, and the harder, the faster you go, the hotter it gets. On one trip, we were testing the engine for a breakdown, and George went down to Avon and back with a whole string of heavy tank cars full, and coaches and things, and that was the best time it had ever fired because we had a heavy load on it, and he was going lickety-split. I don't know how fast he was going, fastest I ever went in that engine. And I had big, heavy gloves on, and I burned a spot on the back of both of my hands through the glove because it was so hot, working so fast.
The wheels slip, the whole fire can go right through the stack.
Yeah, that's why you always hear them start slow, just a little bit, because if it goes, you just suck a lot of the cinders and the coal right out of the fire, out the stack. So it's quite a trick.
Quite an art to it.
You gotta learn to run them just right. Because the other thing you can do is you can make the firemen work very hard because you time the time that the steam goes into those cylinders with a lever, forward and reverse lever. And when the new guy gets on there, they always think it's funny to push it way over the edge so that they're putting steam for the whole time and you're working your butt off, where if you're doing it right, you only use a little bit of steam and let the steam expand, and then the fireman doesn't have to work so hard. But you know, that's part of learning, you
The
know, the tricks of the
engineer
trade.
didn't like the fireman.
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
know what happened.
I remember when I was coming in town, we'd know what time it was coming back, my mother would run outside and grab clothes off the line, because that soot would be in the air and would cover the clothes.
Yeah, we've been, a lot of people have been mad at us for that.
We got a lot of phone calls on that.
It takes about 1.5 tons of coal per trip, what it used to take, not counting what it took to get it going. And
Where is this?
Route 15,
Right by the Hess station, right?
yeah, right by the head station. A little higher now because they raised the bridge and lowered the road, I think.
We'll just raise the bridge.
For the trucks.
That was a nice engine to fire, but it developed, we got bizarre. After we had taken 17 and cut it up for scrap, because they figured it couldn't be fixed, we bought the steam engine, which is number 38, which this is a copy of the number plate for it that I bought from the Gettysburg Railroad of all things, after we sold it later on to them. But it arrived on a truck, 2 trucks. The running gear on one and the boiler on the other, and those slides I can't get to drop down show them unloading that from the truck and putting the boiler on back on top of the wheels. There's a picture on the table over there, and you said Ronnie Vandermeer had a whole series of black and white
You took a
prints.
whole series of those, didn't you, Ron?
Yes, I did.
Oh, hi, Ron.
Now, where was this?
Well, these are all, see, I always thought
Yeah.
these were from Livonia.
No, I'm not.
This is Lakeville.
Oh.
What you're looking at now is the engine house. This part of the engine house was our first engine house, only it wasn't at this location on Stone Hill Road, where those bumpy tracks are there. This used to be down at the end of the tracks by the lake, next to the mill. And we built it in 65, I think. About 67, I think we moved it, because it was always wet. We had a pit, it was always full of water. And so we put Wingates and George and myself, I've forgotten who else, probably Harrington, and we just put poles across the flat car, chained them to the vertical posts, because it was a pole barn construction, and then just sawed them off and pulled it down the tracks and backed it in here and put it there. What you see now, at this later stage, is the beginning of the construction of a bigger addition to it.
It was 1978 when that picture was taken.
And you'll see this in another picture later on, in very lousy weather.
Is that still there?
Yep, still there, with a bigger building, and these things inside now.
Oh.
See, we only had enough room for one engine in that engine house, and the other engine had to sit outside. I can tell you now, and so when the other engine sat outside, like the big, like 20, those engines that didn't have antifreeze in it. So it has to stay always warm. You either have to run it, put it inside, or, as we did, connect it to the boiler and let the boiler with a heat exchanger keep it warm. Well, that boiler had a tendency to go out sometimes. And then you had from that happened to about 2 hours before you had to either start the engine or you weren't going to start it. And it would freeze up. So I had rigged a telephone dialer, so when the temperature dropped on it, it would call me up at home, and I'd have to get up and come down and figure out why the boiler wouldn't work. Sometimes it was so cold that the fuel oil wouldn't flow from the tank into the furnace. You'd have to get the torch and heat up the lines and things. All these things that sound crazy, but I was, after I did that, I thought, boy, that was stupid, because now it was always the worst night of the year when I'd have to get up and go out and
Where was this?
fix it. Where was this shot? Somewhere near the engine house
Oh.
in Lakeville. These are all around Lake, a lot of work around Lakeville. Now, you'll see that steam engines, unlike a diesel, which you can go over there and start it up, and in 20 minutes you can go when it pumps up and gets warm. These things takes a lot of people working on them, putting the grease in, putting the oil, putting the water, working on those things, getting them started. And it's a 2-hour project before you get going anywhere, compared to a diesel that one person can go start it in half an hour drive away, or even faster than that sometimes. And it was dirty work. When I used to keep 38 at one summer at my house overnight, because in the summertime we ran it every day, one trip. And at night we wouldn't let the fire go out, we'd keep the fire going, but somebody had to babysit it. To keep the water up, to keep the fire going. And we used to have somebody that did that for us, but one summer we didn't, so I'd bring it home and park it beside my house over there on Bronson Hill. And which worked out pretty well. I'd pull the pins from the side here so kids couldn't come and steal it and take it, and covered up the stack and bank the fire. And that would usually last until the morning, when you'd have to go over and fire it up again and get it up to steam and come to make the next trip. And every other day I'd have to go down to Lakeville and I'd crawl underneath and repack the bearings, all the main bearings with grease, because it's big heavy grease like beeswax that rides against the shaft, and as it warms up it feeds up into there. So every other day you had to do that, and then you had to put the coal in, you had to put the water in. And so I'd do that, and then come back by my house, and a couple times, well, often I'd pick up my kids or my wife and bring them to Livonia to do the shopping. And Donna did her shopping there one day and rode back on the passenger train. And we stopped the train by our house, but you couldn't see our house, it's just the woods. And the lady said to her, "Why are we stopping here?" And she says, "Because this is my stop." She and the kids got off. We all wondered what she must have thought about our train.
But tell them about when it rained.
Oh, well, that's a story that I wasn't the only engineer. Back then was Hutchinson and George and myself, and we all took turns doing it. But Hutch's favorite thing was when he ran the engine, he liked the whistle rope nice and tight. He didn't want it loose. Well, that was fine. He'd tighten it up. Well, then when we park it at night, if it rained, the rain started to make the rope get tighter and tighter. In the middle of the night, I'd hear the wheels whistle start. It started low, so I'd have to get up, walk through the woods, wet, pouring down rain, and go over there and unloosen the whistle rope. Well, that's another one of those crazy stories. And there you saw George Cole in the...
Was there one spot where it was stored around here?
Where was
The coal? Lakeville. We did all of that kind of stuff usually down in Lakeville at the engine house.
And where'd you get your coal, in the city?
The coal used to come in by railroad car out of Pennsylvania.
Oh.
From various places in Pennsylvania. We'd buy probably, about 2 or 3 cars of coal a year. And we'd unload the coal cars in Lakeville, and then we'd use the clamshell crane to load the...
To load it into the tender. Yeah. Some coal burned nice and some coal was awful. It just wouldn't burn at all. It was awful stuff. You'd run out of steam sometimes coming back up the hill from Avon to Livonia. It was awful. But then we'd always send somebody out with a big oil can to oil the side of the engine while we built up steam. We never admitted we ran out of steam. No.
That was some sort of plausible explanation.
Yeah, there was always some other reason.
Or the sheep were under the...
That's my 2 kids, I think. That's sort of the messy, dirty stuff that was always there. Is that in focus? I guess that may not...
Who is it?
It's Kevin.
That's Kevin. That's some of our early days around the railroad.
That's Kevin.
See, Kevin came out here he was a student at RIT, and he came out to make a movie, and he liked it so much he's never left. And all of these guys, when they worked for the railroad all these years, and still, I guess, they'd work all week for not much money, because we didn't have much money. And then on come the weekend, they come out and donate their time to fix the tracks and do all the other things. So always everybody was hardworking and got along pretty well. That's me at the controls of 38. Well, these are my slides, you can tell. I'm not sure how they're my slides, because I couldn't take that picture. Somebody else took it for me, I guess. Gave it to me. I was younger then, as we all were. There's your firebox. That's what it looks like when it's just sitting there.
Is that you?
Much hotter when it's running. Yeah, that's me.
You step on the pedal and the doors would go.
Yeah.
So how many hours?
You
a
step
week?
on the pedal and the door's open, and you got to be real quick and get that coal in and out and get the doors shut quick.
How many hours a week would you put in?
How many hours a week? Oh, I don't know. I probably, when I was keeping it at the house, you know, you'd go over and fire it up about 10 o'clock, or depending on whether you had to go to Lakeville and put the new grease in and the coal and the water, so you might spend 20 hours a week. In Lakeville is where we have our shippers. All of the people that used to be our customers here aren't in business anymore. And Western Sugar?
Western New York syrup.
Started in Lakeville. They built a plant there to make sugar and water together. Of course, we had to haul the sugar in, and I was told that the reason they built the plant there was that Ron Allen, the fellow, had invented this mechanism to mix sugar and water, and he wanted to sell this to people, so he had to have a plant to show how it worked. It turned out that what people wanted was the sugar water. All the food processors in Rochester, of which there are many, liked the sweet sugar water that they could now get in the tank truck. So it turned out to be a nice booming business for us, and over the years they've perfected corn syrup. And so now some of the stuff coming in is corn syrup, some of it's sugar. And then they built the other new plant, Sweetener's Plus. And they do the same thing, but they also bag sugar and other things, I guess.
They bag sugar, they deliver bulk sugar in trailers. They can do anything from a 5-pound bag of sugar for general retail use up to 2,000-pound totes, big super sacks for deliveries to like bakeries and that type of thing. They do custom blending of syrup because there's certain grades. Corn syrup is not generic. There's like about 10 different grades of corn syrup. And if you use the wrong syrup and the right product, you're liable to have the wrong product.
I understand Ben and Jerry's is a big customer.
Ben & Jerry's is big. Virtually every bottling plant, bakery. This facility serves like almost like a 300-mile radius of Lakeville.
And where's the sugar coming from?
The sugar basically comes out of the upper Midwest, which is beet sugar.
Sugar, okay.
And then there's also a volume of sugar which comes out of Florida, which is your cane sugar.
And that's all coming in by
It all
railroad
comes
car?
in by railroad car because one railroad car equals approximately 4 trailer loads. And with the newer modern versions of freight cars that are coming out, it actually bumps it up closer to like 5 trailer loads.
Do you
On one,
transport?
so every one of those cars is saving 5 trucks from the road.
Do you transport sugar
We're
now?
hauling how many now? Over 3,000 loads a year, aren't we?
Miles, you got a
Yes.
question over here.
You do transport it now? Transport sugar now?
Yeah. That's coming in. 3,000 cars a year of sugar, and mostly sugar and corn syrup and some fertilizer and
To 2 separate facilities. ADM is still active. They're doing a sizable amount of corn syrup. Sweeteners Plus does corn syrup and sugar both. They're toying around now with bringing in cars of molasses for yet another application. So, and then of course, like Miles says, we also handle fertilizer. We handle outbound grain shipments. A lot of the feed wheat around here, which isn't suitable for human consumption, for example, that all goes down to North Carolina and Virginia, down to Purdue, to feed all the chickens. So,
oh,
and then we also serve the Cool Whip plant in Avon, which obviously is the world capital of Cool Whip. So we provide all the syrup and all the tropical oils that go into that product.
I remember my grandfather bringing corn syrup home from the milk plant down there. So I don't know if that was when they were the guy down there was starting to mix the sugar and whatever, but he bring
It's
corn syrup from the milk plant.
It's quite possible. A lot of people get a gallon of syrup here, or a gallon of, or a pound of sugar, or whatever. We haven't bought sugar for our coffee essentially since 1970. Because all we had to do was go over to the syrup plant and get a 5-pound or 5-gallon bucket, and that would last us on the railroad for a period of time. And then we just go back over and get another pale when we were done with that.
We had iced tea made with that corn syrup for years and years.
The coffee salesman comes around and can't figure out why you never buy any sugar from him.
Yeah. Tough to look out the door. Well, this is some shops now around Livonia, the things that took place. I'm not sure what that event was.
This is the excursions we ran like 1983 for the Rochester National Railway Historical Society. This was after we got rid of all of our passenger cars. We were out of the passenger business in 1977, but then for the, let's see, this would have been Livonia Bicentennial.
So that's coming up. Oh, wait, well, bicentennial?
Yeah, the
Okay.
Bicentennial, because we used passenger cars which belonged to the National Railway Historical Society. They sold the tickets, they did all the marketing. All we did is just provide the railroad and the locomotive and the train crew.
Well, in my picture series here, we're not out of the passenger business yet. You'll see slides here. This is over by Bullhead Pond, I think, isn't it? Somewhere over there.
Where's Bulldog Pond?
Bullhead Pond is halfway between here and Avon.
But it's still there.
That's nice. It's a big area. Whereabouts?
Oh, halfway.
Off Trip.
That tells me a lot.
Off the road.
Give me a couple of roads
Trip
there.
Hammer Road. Trip Hammer Road.
Okay, well, yeah.
You can probably see it from Trip Hammer Road.
But it's not there anymore.
No, it's not there. My wife reminded me that one day
Trip Hammer Road.
One day, after about a week of rain, the train, were you on that? Yeah. The train crew came around the bend to go follow the track around the edge of the pond and discovered it was gone. The tracks were hanging in the air. You got stopped.
We came around the corner of the pond and all of a sudden somebody happened to look out and they noticed there was no water in the pond. Well, this is a good tell that something's happened. So they brought the thing to the stop, they walked down, we saw the track dangling in the air.
And then you rebuilt that in something like a week's time, didn't you? 2 weeks' time. They had brought in enough dirt to rebuild the pond, only this time they put a drain in the bottom so that the water won't build up in there again. And the beavers had tried to dam it up a couple of times. And they had to dispense with those.
There's still a little water. There's still a little water in there today, but it's not as pleasant as what it used to look like.
And there always used to be pictures or stories of an old locomotive in the bottom, but there wasn't. This is a picture of 38 coming around. My home is right over here somewhere.
That's Pole Bridge.
Oh, Pole Bridge? Okay. Notice how the right-of-way is full of grass and weeds, and that's the way it used to be in the early days. That's what we inherited, a railroad built on cinders instead of rock and stone, with grass growing in it. Now this, I think, is near my house, isn't it? That's the Bronson Hill Bridge? Yeah.
This is right up by the Packman Rail.
My house would be right over that way, and then this new greenery called Pacma is right over here on this side of the road. Used to make a little smoke. We tried not to build up the fire in one place. When we build the fire up, the first thing of the day, I think this is over Stepney Avon, I think, but see how nice and clean it is? And it's straight.
It's a beautiful picture.
Don't know where it is. Probably Paper Mill Road
No,
or somewhere.
that's at the junction. That's Canisius Lake Junction right off of,
Oh, is it? Oh, is that?
right off of South Lima Road, right behind
Okay.
Duncan's
All right.
house.
All right, South Lima Road. This is typical day, huh? A lot of cold, damp, steamy weather. Here's a nice combination train of both passengers and freight, and we would take them down to Avon. Here's the pond to your left. The engine's going backwards, take those down, and when they get to Avon, they just leave all of these empties over there, pick up any food, come back, grab the coaches, and come back to Livonia. And this was going downhill. This was now going uphill the other way.
This was the pond.
That's the pond.
Oh, that pond, no?
South Lima. Puts it on the map, see? Elevation 912, elevation here is 960 or
On the
something.
station, it was
That's right,
10.50.
10 something. We just saw it in the
1020 or 1050.
one of the slides, you can see the elevation, and Avon is, I think, 600.
Did South Lyman have any
Feet.
industry to stop there, or?
Well, in the early,
Customers
in the real early days of the LA, of course, if you went back into the years on the Erie Railroad and Erie Lackawanna, it was always a big produce and vegetable shipping point. And then towards the end, the early years of our railroad, they did bring in one season or for 2 seasons carloads of seed potatoes out of Maine. They did
Yeah.
bring them in, and then basically after that it pretty much dried up.
Yeah, many years ago, as Vince said, farmers used to pack up all their produce and then take the morning train in and sell their things during the day in Rochester Market, and then the night come back out by train.
There used to be a little station at South Lima. It was over in this area, roughly right in here. And then, of course, the big cold storage, which is still there, is off to the right of the screen. This train would have been going up towards Livonia.
What does the GI stand for?
That was the telegraphic code back when they used to have the Morse telegraph. Livonia was NA, for example, and South Lima was GI, and of course, other places would be like NQ or ZY or something like that. Well, GI, where do you get GI out of South Lima? Well, if you go back into the early history books, at one point in time, South Lima was referred to as Goose Island.
It used to be all flooded with water.
And that
The
telegraphic code
government,
just
yeah,
stayed.
the government ditch, whichever year they built that, is what drained South Lima. It's still there, that big ditch, over near the Tubbs Hotel. Another interesting little story. Remember I told you that this railroad is downhill all the way to Avon. Right over here, one time, one of our crew members had parked 10, the engine, and was out walking on the track to inspect, to look for some bad ties and joints and things that he noticed before. And he looked up, and the engine was rolling away from him. So he ran after it, started running after it, and he couldn't catch it. Couldn't catch it.
All the way
Well, lucky
down?
for him, there's one place in the railroad where the railroad goes down and takes a little dip, and it was right there. So it came almost to my house and then
I
stopped.
remember we did have a runaway instance. We stored flat cars in Livonia back around 1970-71 for the Sterling Homex Corporation, which was building the modular houses in Avon. And one April night, some of the local citizenry here, probably in their teens, decided to let one of the cars loose, and the car actually did get away. It went all the way to Avon. There's a clipping in the other room there of the result. Unfortunately, it went through like 11 crossings, which at that time had no lights or gates. This was in the early evening.
Evening, yeah.
And it went through all these crossings, and it went across Main Street in Avon, which was a busy road then, just as it is now.
Didn't hit anybody.
Didn't hit anybody, and it impacted several refrigerator cars for General Foods. And that's what stopped it. There's a picture in the other room, there's the newspaper.
Did they find out who did it?
Yeah.
They found out.
Actually, they did, yeah.
We charge off more families for the damage. I don't know who it is, I don't care.
What was that caboose before this? Before you quit, that you had a caboose, was that the caboose?
I don't know.
You clicked so quickly, you don't tell us.
You had to picture it. Didn't say anything.
Back up one.
Back up one.
Back up one.
I can't.
Oh, God.
Backup doesn't work on this, you have to do it back there.
Oh. Well, there was a caboose and then.
There was a caboose?
Yeah.
Oh, well,
Is
probably one of
that the
our...
one, is that the one on River Road?
No, this is LA&L.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
This is a caboose we owned once.
No, we still have that caboose, and the caboose is in the building down on Stone Hill Road.
Oh, is it? Oh.
We still have that. We have a passenger car, an office car stored in there.
You
And
still have a business car?
we have the business cars in the building on Stone Hill Road. And we also use it for our signal maintainer and supplies and whatever else is required to operate a railroad.
Back to that runaway story, a friend of ours in South Lima, Dale Foster, saw it go by South Lima, that flat car heading for Avon. Called the sheriff, and before the sheriff could get to Avon, it had gone across the crossing in Avon. Where that is, I don't know, but that was our caboose. There's just some typical engines, that locomotive power and whatever you want to call it, around Lakeville.
Yeah, that was during the construction of our shop on Stone Hill Road in 1978. This engine was number 10. This was the second engine we bought over here, which was number 20. And the one in the middle there was 72, which we bought from the South Buffalo Railroad, 78, right?
Yeah.
78 we bought that, and then at the time when we bought this bigger engine, then we ended up selling number 10 to a locomotive dealer. And eventually it was sold to Cargill and used in one of their grain elevators out in Ohio someplace.
And we have now how many, 21 locomotives in our whole system, LA&L and our other subsidiaries?
Pretty close to it.
What happens with the engines? You got one going one way, does one do all the pulling, and what do the other ones do while one is working, or they all
Well,
working?
these engines here weren't equipped with what they call MU. MU stands for multiple unit. And what you do, you run jumpers between each locomotive, and the lead locomotive will act as the control unit. So you can have 5 or 6 or 7 units in your con system. You can control them all from one cab. Well, with the exception of the little 10 here, the other ones didn't have MU. So if we had a big train with these 2 engines here, we had to have an engineer in each cab.
So they were all working together?
So they're all working together under the control of each one had an individual engineer. And then now that we've got newer locomotives, they have MU. And now one engineer can control as many engines
As many as you can put in there. So you can run a train today with 2 people, right? 2 persons.
Just an engineer and a conductor.
Conductor. Used to be 7 years ago when they had to have flagmen
Back
and
in the
brakemen.
full crew law, that was repealed back in the 60s, but I think that was like a 5-man crew then in the 1960s. And that is 72 after Kevin repainted it in 1978.
He makes them all look good like this. Repaints them. He repainted 38 even, the steamer.
Takes a lot of effort to get these old locomotives, to bring them in, evaluate them, go in there, clean them up, repair certain components. I mean, usually when we buy locomotives, the first thing we hear from all the rail buffs is, well, you painted these?
It's the 38 on the G&W, the only time I remember that. And we were just trying to figure out why it was there. Probably we sent it over to G&W shops for service, we think, but we're not sure. It's rare to see something like that engine running on another line. Usually they put it in their train and haul it.
In the early days, we just went over and took whatever parts we needed from the G&W.
Yeah, they were very, very helpful to us. They loaned us equipment, they loaned us people. Yeah.
Where was this going now? What's the secret?
This is coming from the G&W, which is over near what, Redsaw,
Yeah.
heading towards Caledonia.
Oh, okay, now you explain, yeah.
GNW stands for?
Genesee and
Genesee and Wyoming.
Genesee, Wyoming.
This
Just
is
yesterday.
somewhere between Fowlerville and Redsoff. It looks like it's going up the grade into Redsoff, actually.
Oh.
They don't have that G&W anymore, do they?
No, that locomotive just went over for servicing. The G&W at that time, they had a bigger, much more sophisticated shop, heavier equipment, which we didn't have. So in a case like that, we would send the locomotive off.
This was the, what?
I think this was when we did the dedication for, we put the plaque on 38 for Peter Barry. And this was after, I think Pete Barry passed away in 1972, 73. And this was the dedication ceremony when we dedicated the engine. I think this
The
was...
slides were dated 75, I noticed that.
Okay, this was
Because I thought it was
probably...
something to do with 1776 and 19.
No, this was...
We turned the engine.
Yeah, the engine turned the other way.
We turned the engine for this dedication for Pete
And
Barry.
Peter Barry was?
He was one of the early founders of the LA&L Railroad. He was
The mayor of Rochester.
mayor of Rochester back in the
People
50s.
knew.
He was president of the Monroe Savings Bank for a period of time.
They convinced a lot of the bankers from Rochester to invest their money in the LA&L to keep it going, and so that's helped us an awful lot. And then they had friends that had money, and so we sold them shares of stock.
People putting pennies on the rail?
Oh, sure. You gotta smash your pennies. That's Livonia.
Yeah. We're both in Livonia.
Right over there,
Right on Main Street.
Right here, Gibbs.
100 feet. Station's right here,
Gibbs is right
15's
there.
right there.
Oh, yeah, by Gibbs.
Yep, there's
Gibbs is
Gibbs.
Right,
that
Gibbs,
brown
yeah.
building.
Yep. You probably know some of those. There's Sarge Wise and Gene Blaby, our current CEO, and myself. You'll see some more people in there that you probably recognize. Oh, their backs.
There's the
There's
plaque.
George. From there's the plaque, Commander Peter Berry.
Well, that plaque is currently on number 20, because after we sold 38 in the passenger train to the Gettysburg, we removed the plaque and we put it on number 20, and it's still on the engine today.
Kevin, Scotty, a few other people. And then some of the other things they did, this is Mosby's Raiders. And this group of imitating federal troops and Confederate troops rode the train and later attacked it halfway between Avon and Livonia.
Put an old cannon on the flat car, had a reenactment down behind Kraft Foods down in Avon, and they just
Yeah.
charged the cannon and it shattered out one of the windows on the vestibule of the passenger.
I didn't know that story. I just thought it was interesting to hear that I looked at this series of slides that they are getting on the train, and then there were all these good-looking ladies, and it must have been 50 of them in these dresses getting on the train. And I caught Kevin over here keeping an eye on him. And George had been looking at him. And then their commander got after George, I think. Yeah, they were shooting it. Were they shooting at us? They were shooting at somebody else, weren't they?
Didn't Glove have that cannon?
I don't know. So I don't know, somewhere they stopped and they
Oh,
stopped.
yeah.
Yeah, we ran those a couple of times.
Yeah.
Kevin brought, yeah, we did do it at Paper Mill Road a couple of times. And at least once or twice down behind Kraft Foods.
Yeah, he moved away.
What you're looking at now is the inside of the firebox of the steamer. And it's the flues, and the hot air goes through those flues. Well, we developed some bad leaks in a flue sheet at the end of the flues that is on the end where the firebox is. In fact, I think I ran the last run on it. It was in the morning to some special group.
It was the morning of a special trip
And
for
it got
LA&L.
leaking so bad that we were just afraid to run it anymore. Well, you couldn't, it was putting the fire out. Standing in front of it, I got to run it one way when I went down there.
They restored it and they're using it.
Yeah, they welded it up, and we were told you couldn't do that. But they found.
Well, they
something
ran it
that
for
welded
several
up.
years. It was in and out of service, and last we know, it's basically down in Kane, Pennsylvania. It's in a dormant status right now.
Well, they're not running it, I didn't. Well, it keeps a lot of people, as I said, busy working down there. And
Well, at that time, it was coming by truck too out of Honeywell Falls, out of the stone quarry, and then we would bring it to Lakeville and transport it into our hopper cars. We could go out and actually place it down on the track.
And there's a statistic on your sheet at the end that tells how many, during the rehabilitation that we did later, how many tons of ballast that were installed at the bottom of the sheet. I don't remember the number. Incredible amount. About a couple hundred car train loads is the equivalent of it, I think.
Hey Vince, is any of your rail welded at all?
We have about 2 miles of welded rail in place, which we installed last year, the year before.
Yeah, we had light rail before, 85 pound or something, down to the junction, and that's been raised much heavier steel. What's a welded rail now? What weight is that?
131, 132.
That
Yeah,
means
it
weight
weighs
per what, yard?
Per yard. 132 pounds per yard versus the LA&L acquired when they bought the railroad, the pre-existing track, that was only basically 90 pounds per yard. And the Lakeville branch was even less, that was 80 pounds per yard, and that was a rail that was all rolled back in the 1890s. Fact of it is, there's still some rail in Lakeville. If you look at the side of it, it'll say Lackawanna Iron and Steel, Scranton, Pennsylvania, 1881, 1885. But,
And you look at that old rail and it's kinked like this, and it's kinked like this, and it's good to get the newer rail in, especially with the heavier trains, because they just push it down. There was the crew working in the engine house again. This is myself and my daughter. And was that 20 or
10, that was 10.
That was 10. And George got a little excited there one day for some reason. I don't know how I happened to catch that. Is that you?
That's Kevin, George Wood, this is Johnny Eiler from Avon. Johnny was actually one of the first employees, paid employees on the LA&L back in 1964.
Yeah.
And
And
there's
then
that
they
car
had no
that's
money
in-
then to that first year, and they had to lay everybody off.
Isn't that the car that's in so many pictures?
Is that the same car? I don't know.
No, but that is your car, isn't it?
This is switching down in Lakeville, and then we run into these kind of situations. Where the railroad train has to go through, you know, in the wintertime as well as the summer.
It's taken right down by Smith Lumber, right on 15 and Lakeville.
And there were lots and lots of pictures. I didn't put 20 of them in there. I put in about 2 or 3, I
This
think.
is right up at South Lima Road. This was during the blizzard of 77, 78.
Some of them, they had to use dozers to get in there. The train couldn't go through.
No, just the pilot plow and the locomotive. And by the time we got to Avon, the snow was all the way up above the headlight. And we couldn't get out the back door because the snow was packed up by the handrails. And the only way we could get out of the cab is to go out the other door, to the back of the locomotive.
Yeah, this is coming up from Lakeville, isn't it? Right
It's
there?
coming up from Lakeville, right?
Yeah, yeah. That's a 5% grade right here, which is very difficult to get up. And then the junction is right here. It's over on
South Lima Road.
Lima Road. One time the train was coming the other way towards Livonia, and the train got about halfway across that switch, and then the rest of the train went the other way. And so we ended up with a passenger car stuck in the mud right across the road that when we tried to re-rail it, which we tried to do by backing up and putting props and wedges and things under the wheels, couldn't do it, couldn't move it. They had to get a crane to come and get the call to go fix it. These are the kind of things we don't like to see. That means a lot of work.
Yeah.
Yeah, the amazing thing about it was it happened during a snowstorm. Well, it's hard to believe that there was even snow by looking at that picture there, but it occurred during a heavy snow squall. We were switching ADM at the time, and I think George got on the radio, and we were using CB radios to switch with. And he got on the radio and said, I can't push him in, I can't push him in.
See some more motive power. I think that's an Avon, isn't it?
Yeah, that's Avon, down by Main Street, King Cole Bean Company.
Now, I believe that this is the first train to Genesee Junction, because with reorganization of trains, we ended up having bought, I guess, gotten the right go all the way from Avon to Genesee Junction, which is a yard just across Scottsville Road by the big steel bridge that goes across the river.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I think this is the first
Mine
train I was on it with Kevin and
This would have been 1996. We acquired the Conrail line from Avon to Rochester. Conrail was in the process of spinning off all their smaller branch lines to other operators, to short line operators.
This is Avon, and this was another little, I think it was an inspection tour or something, I'm not sure what the circumstances are now. That had not, I don't think had something to do with this. This looks like the board of directors on what we used to call an inspection tour.
Yeah, the
Where we
same,
meet once a year and we go out and look
Yeah,
at how well they're doing.
that was the board, or the stockholders meeting, because we had the passenger cars there in conjunction with the Livonia Bicentennial. The cars were available to run a stockholders special, which we hadn't done since we had disposed of our own equipment.
The meeting at the sportsman's.
The meeting was at the Sportsman's Club, that's right.
And I didn't mention that, but I can recall one night having a meeting.
A whole new number of short line operators to come into the picture and do exactly the same thing like what the LA&L did in 1964.
We got a little ahead of ourselves here. This is This is the new yard in Lakeville now, that we built 2 years ago. This is the beginning of the new engine house and the corporate offices. And that, it moved along, right now it's all complete and finished, and it has another bay out the side, doesn't it now? Very nice building. They can jack those engines way up and change the wheels and do things in there. It's incredible what they can do now. There you see a locomotive. Here's a set of trucks that would be under another locomotive. We change the engines out and things in those. We buy locomotives used, don't we? Sometimes we get 2 or 3 or 4 at a time at a good price. And then Kevin and his crew rehabilitate them, and that's why they last 40, 50 years.
These are, that was like this one here is like a 1964 vintage locomotive. That was brand new in 1964. It was a road locomotive. It was used in premium freight train service and all the major railroads and whatnot. Well, now it's, you know, they're pretty much out of favor. The manufacturer's gone out of business. They're getting old. They cascade down into the hands of smaller operators like the LA&L, and you know, with a little bit of time, effort, and care and some money, you can reactivate these things, and you can still have a good, healthy 2,000 horsepower locomotive with a fraction of buying a brand new one.
Can you
Where
buy
are you finding parts?
your parts? That's what I remember.
Well, the
Not by winding them up. Here's some typical shots that were taken down alongside of the engine house. These are locomotives waiting to be rehabilitated, right?
Those are ones you own now?
Yeah.
And just,
Yeah, what I say, we own 21, I think, now altogether.
Where do you keep them?
on the side of the building there?
These are all down in Lakeville, right behind Sweeteners Plus.
These are, but there's some down in Bath and some in Faulkner, New York.
How do you keep track of them?
I don't know how do you keep track of them, Bill? How do you